Well, there's always something interesting in my shop, and today we've got my grandpa's Model A. He wants me to kind of look it over, give it a bit of grease, and apparently the brakes aren't working so good, so he wants me to look at that, see if I can adjust them. And I've already crawled under the car to kind of get an idea of how the brakes work and how I can adjust them, and I found some things. So we're going to just go ahead, jack this old thing up, and I'll take you underneath and I'll show you what I found. And I haven't decided yet what I want to do about it, but let's get her up in the air so I can take you down there. Alright, I got this old thing up off the ground. Let's go ahead and crawl underneath it, and I'll show you kind of how this mechanical braking system works. It's kind of neat. Alright, we're up under the car here, and where that clevis is, that's where the brake pedal attaches to. Onto that lever, and that pulls that rod that attaches to that lever right there. And then what that lever does is it takes this whole arm and rotates it. On each end of this arm there's another little lever, or two little levers I should say, and one goes to the back, one goes to the front, and that pulls on these rods here. And then, yeah, probably see in the back a little better. Those rods pull on that thing, that lever, and then that makes your brakes work. And the parking brake, which is the other lever we've got here, kind of works the same way. It's a different shaft, but let's see if I can see it. There we go. There's your lever that goes up to your hand brake, your emergency brake. And then below it here, you've got this that comes down, goes to another rod, and then goes to this other lever in the back. Now in this car, I don't think there's any parking brake mechanism in there at all, because this just kind of flops around, so I'm not going to mess with that. Yeah, we're missing stuff in there. But on this one, the brakes themselves work. There are adjusters right there, that little bolt. You can turn that and tighten up the brakes, but I think they're pretty well tight as it is, so probably not going to mess with those. When you step on the brakes on this thing, if you push it all the way to the floor, all the wheels will lock up except for one, so I'm thinking they're pretty well adjusted. The problem is the pedal goes way too far down, and most of the reason for that is all the worn out parts here. If you look on this shaft, this is a shaft that rotates, the bushings are both pretty well worn, so you've got some slop in there. And all of these pins that go through here, they're all worn, so you've got slop there. This rod that goes to the front, I don't know how well we're going to be able to see it. I can turn on the light, maybe. There we go. But it's just about eaten all the way through because it wore against this little return spring thing. And yeah, there ain't much left of that rod. Not a whole lot. Let's see if I can get a good picture. There we go. You can kind of see. Yeah. Not good. And the other rod on this side, this is the wheel that doesn't stop all the way. I don't know if you can see that up there. But that brake rod, see if I can get a better angle, that brake rod is bent. It should be straight, so if I were to try to adjust this, I don't think I'd get the adjustment I want, because when this thing pulls back, it's just going to try to straighten that rod out before it tries to pull the lever. I think what might have happened is this thing was sitting too far over, and it might have got caught on that shock or something and bent it that way, or maybe somebody bent it that way on purpose. I have no idea, but it's not right. So I think I'm gonna have to get two new rods. I don't know if I can even break these loose. It doesn't look like it's been adjusted forever. I think they've just been using the adjusters on the wheels here to tighten up the brakes and never bothered with this. So I think we're gonna need two new rods, one for that side because it's almost wore through, one for this side because it's bent, and I'm going to get new springs because they're wore out. pretty good. All new pins. That should take the slop out. And I can get new bushings for that thing. I think I'm going to get split bushings. That way I can take it apart and I don't have to take these arms off, because I believe they're riveted in, and I don't want to do that. So I can take it down, take it out, and cut the old bushing off and put a split bushing in there, and hopefully that'll take up most of that slack. I think that's the plan anyway. So nothing I can do with it now until I get a few parts anyway. Let's see if I can pop one of these pins out, because they're pretty well wore. I can show you. Yeah, set it on the ground there maybe. Yeah, you can see they're wore right out. So get some new pins, a couple new rods. Not terribly expensive, but I'm going to have to wait on the parts. Well, this car's got its fair share of little issues. Not just the brakes, but kind of all sorts of little things that are wrong with it. But I'm not going to pull the wheels off and look at the drums and look at the brakes and all that, because I think that's just a can of worms I don't want to open. And in all honesty, this car hasn't left the property in probably 10 or 15 years. I don't think it's been on the road, so I don't see it going very far. So I'm not too worried about it. As long as it stops fairly evenly, you know, it doesn't really get driven, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. We'll just get it so it stops evenly and he doesn't have to push the pedal down all the way to the floor to get it to stop, and fix a few little things, and brake rods and the pins, are, you know, all that stuff's cheap, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm not going to worry about the handbrake. I don't think the parts are even in there, so I guess we'll just wait for parts and yeah, go from there. Well, I ended up doing what I said I wasn't going to do, and that's pull the front wheels off and check out the brakes. My grandpa came up the other day to kind of check out how things were going, and kind of hinted at the fact that he wanted the front wheel bearings repacked. So pull the wheels off and we'll check it out. And this side's pretty good for the most part. We're getting down to the rivets here on the back. I don't know if you can see that. Getting down on those, and of course the grease is kind of chunky and nasty, so we're replacing that anyway, but everything else looks pretty good. And if I actuate the brakes, both sides go out when I put the brakes on, so that's working. Now the other side is a little bit worse. You can see here we're getting down to the rivets in a couple of spots, and we got a lot of goo right here. And when we activate the brakes on this side, only one shoe moves. So I'm not going to mess with the actual linings here today. I think I'm just going to make a mental note of it, tell them about it, and I'll go ahead and repack the bearings. I'll clean that up and hopefully get that working again, and then put the wheels back on. Now the back, I pulled the wheel off just to see how it was attached, and then I went, what is this? And I went online just to see what they were saying, and sometimes these can be a real pain to get off. Got to get a puller on there, and I have to push this out tomorrow to get another car in, so I don't want to take the chance on breaking something or whatnot. And I don't plan to fix anything right now back here anyway, so I'm just going to assume the linings are worn, and probably whatever the emergency brake used to be attached to is no longer there. So kind of everything I already know, so we're not going to mess with that. I'm going to put the wheel back on in that one, and we'll get everything greased back up, put the wheels back on, and then my parts will come Saturday. Should come Saturday. And I got 2 new rods coming, because that one's bent and they're both pretty much starting to wear through. And then I got the new bushings coming from that. I'll have to cut those off, and the new ones are half bushing, so I don't have to take these ends off to replace them. I'm sure there's some wear on the shaft itself, but Hopefully new bushings will take up most of that. And I got new springs coming too, because these are kind of wore out. But once we get that, we can get her fixed, and then at least I'll have sort of even rods and less slop to work with. So hopefully we make her stop straight. Alright, we got some parts for this thing finally, and I'm just working on the brake cross shaft here. Cut off the old bushings with a Dremel. They're like a metal shell, and then, you know, probably asbestos. I don't know what that is, but anyway, cut them off with a little Dremel so I don't dig into the shaft at all. Got those out of the way, and now I can put my little half bushings on. And just plop on there like that, and then I'll bolt them in, and cross shaft should be done. I've got my new rods sitting there, so we can put those in. And what else have I got? Got my little return springs and pins and all that stuff in the bag here, so should be able to knock this thing out pretty quick and see if we can make it stop again. Alright, we're under the car, and I got my new bushings in here, and I got these back up. I used new bolts because the head on one of the bolts was pretty rusty, so I figured I'd probably slip the wrench if I tried to put it back on. So I just got new bolts. They're the same style as the old ones. New bushings are in there, and it's taken almost all of the play out of it. There's a tiny bit here on this side because the shaft itself was wore down a little bit, but I figured, you know, it was not enough for me to bother taking the ends off, so I think that'll cure most of our play in that part of it anyway. That side's solid as a rock. So now I'm going to go up and grab my two new rods and get those ready to go. Alright, here are my new, well, one of my new rods. This is the old rod here, and I replaced it because it's just about wore through there. And I also picked up some new springs because it's been riding on that and wearing it out. So for 13 bucks, pick up a set of new springs. Now the one thing that's a little bit different is these new rods. If you can see the end there, they're a good bit fatter, so I won't be able to just slide my new spring on there. What I'm going to have to do is probably take this to the grinder and tickle that down a little bit so I can fit the new flat spring on. I knew they were oversized when I bought them, so I saw this coming, but get that new flat spring on, and then they're a little bit wider as well. They're a bit oversized, so I may have to shave this face down too to get it in the forks. I won't know about that until I get it on the car, and we'll see what it does. But for now, shave that down and get my spring on, and then throw the ends on and see if we can slap it in the car. Alright, I got all the brake rods back in this thing, all the pins in, all new pins, and I've got all the rods adjusted as short as they can be, and I even went ahead and cranked up the adjusters on the brakes themselves about as far as I dare go with them, just short of dragging on freewheel, and they're still not quite enough. I can get 3 of the tires to lock up, but that one is a no-go because the shoes are worn so bad that it's just not gonna stop for me. So I had to basically tighten up everything I could almost all the way to get them to stop. So I'm thinking I'm probably gonna need brakes all around. It's as good as I can get it until I do that, and I'm imagining I'm gonna have to do some machine work on the drums, especially that one. It's got some pretty good grooves in it, so not gonna stop on a dime until we take care of that at some point. But it's kind of one of those things, a rabbit hole, you know, where do you stop? Because if you do the brakes, you might as well fix the bushings in here so the wheel don't rattle, or flop back and forth I should say. And then the steering gear under there, that's got some bad bushings in it, quite a bit of play in that. And I don't know what the rear brakes look like. I never did take them off, kind of scared to look at it, but at least it stops now. So maybe we'll come back to it at some point and put shoes on it and inspect and see what all the million parts of the brake system look like on the inside. And hopefully they're not wore too. I just know it's going to be a can of worms either way, but yeah, if we come back to it, I'll make some more videos. You didn't think I was going to have this in my shop and not fire it up for you. At least try to. Got a lot of little controls and whatnot in here. Let's see if I can remember how this thing operates. Get in this tight little thing. There we go. Alright, turn the boom boom juice on like that. And we'll play with this little gizzy here. That's good. That ought to work. Turn our key on. Make sure that's popped out. Remember, never go full retard unless you're starting a Model A. And give the tater stick a couple of bumps. That'll probably work. Keys on, in neutral. And give it a little choke. Come on, key. What? Is my battery dead? Oh, I'm hitting the hitting the wrong button, dummy. Alright. Bring her down to Rain Man levels here. That's a little too far. There we go. A little bit. Fiddle with that gizzy. That was too much. That sounds about right. Alright, let her warm up and then we'll drive her out of here. Remember, that's the throttle. Throttle, not the starter.